Hi, DJ. We're just doing check-ins. Maybe Lou, if you want to go next, why you're interested in defining empathy project, a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm Lou Zweier. I live in Northern California. I met Edwin about 15 years ago, and I've been involved with him doing Empathy Circle work for about 5 years. And I helped develop the Empathy Circle facilitator training that we've been doing, and been running a bunch of sessions of that. Um, I've been involved with communication skills and conflict resolution, nonviolent communication for a really long time, and have taught it and have made instructional videos about it. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in empathy because it's a very powerful tool for creating connection and understanding, and we need more connection and understanding in the world. Um, whether it's with family members or coworkers or community members, there's differences everywhere, and learning to respond to difference with curiosity and empathy and desire for understanding. That's one of my goals. I've been working on that probably my whole life, actually, when I look at it, even as a kid. Um, and I think, I'm interested in this project. Um, to the degree that being able to have words to describe what empathy is, to the degree that that helps people figure out how to be empathic, um, then I'm interested in defining empathy. I'm much more interested in doing empathy and helping people, supporting people in doing empathy, than in defining it in some academic way. But to the degree that a cognitive understanding and having words helps people do stuff and guides them, that's very meaningful. I also think, to the degree that getting validation or support from the academic world, by defining it and kind of showing that the work we're doing is serious, that we're thoughtful about it, I think it also has value for that reason.
Okay, thanks, Lou. Yeah, I just see Lou as a fabulous facilitator, just curriculum designer. It's just great that we've been working together. It's kind of like the heart of the what we're doing here. So thanks, Lou.
I always meet fantastic new people when I come to things that you invite me to, Edwin. So I'm grateful to be here. Just the two people have introduced themselves already. Like, wow, how great to be with you, and how actually inspiring and how nourished I feel by meeting other people who like really care about trying to make a more empathic world and are thoughtful about it, who have background and experience and are really thoughtful about it. So yeah, very happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. Jana, you want to share? You're muted.
I have 3 minutes. I'm at work, so I don't know. This empathy circle, I'll kind of be like Matthew Osu, like coming and going. So I hope that's okay. And um, I did a lot of reading and some research on empathy and splitting before I started studying with the Dalai Lama. And so I'm interested in the compassion revolution and the empathy revolution and the altruism revolution and the reincarnation revolution and a few other revolutions that are similarly related. So I'm interested that we get it all right. Yeah, thanks. And I'm
Okay,
new.
thanks, Jana. Colin, would you like to go?
Yes, I'm Colin Cafferty. I'm based in Berlin in Germany, originally from Ireland. I'm new to empathy circles, currently doing the facilitation course. So I know a couple of faces here, Crystal, DJ, and Jana. I found out about it through Priyanka, who is also part of the Defining Empathy group. And I hope to support her with the self-empathy piece. I'm interested in self-compassion. Completed a course in mindful self-compassion with, that was originally from Kristen Neff. That was last year. I also have an interest in emotional intelligence, and I'm a coach and facilitator. And empathy being a core part of emotional intelligence leads me here as well. I would like to be more empathic myself. I would like to be more empathic in my professional and personal life. As a coach, it's a great skill to have. But I think there's this need for more empathy in the world, and this idea of connection, connecting with ourselves, connecting with others, connecting with nature. I also did a course to become I'm now a facilitator of the work that reconnects also, and so I see some overlap there. Yeah, I'm a newbie. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. I'm not sure what to expect, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Great, thanks, Colin. And we just, I just met with Priyanka before this because she's in India. So this time slot is like just really late for her. So she's working on self-compassion, and Colin has been meeting with her to kind of work together as a team on the self-compassion section. So just a little bit of background about that. Hi, DJ. We're just introducing ourselves, why we're interested in this Defining Empathy project.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Edwin. I think this is a very exciting and unusual kind of event. And I would say that what I bring to the table is this idea of the individual and culture, which I studied with the Neuropsychiatric Institute at UCLA, part of my PhD. And then I went on to create a course for the state of Florida called Introduction to Education with Field Experience. And I wrote a workbook for that field experience. And this whole idea of people experience whatever they see, whatever they perceive. And we can't really define that. But what we can help people or empower people to do is to hone their observation skills and their awareness level to be more unbiased. And that's it.
Okay, so I'm going to put a link in. The first one is for our project page for the team. And if you scroll down to, down to page 2 or 3, there's a place for notes. If you want to take notes, we're going to do an empathy circle. And on this, to talk about designing the project. And you can take notes there, and then we can kind of help organize those. And I put the other link in there for the Defining Empathy website. So I'm going to give just a quick review of it. And then we'll go into an empathy circle to talk about it. The idea was that Priyanka and I had been not Priyanka, but Violetta and I had been meeting, and we've been working and developing this project. And we thought we should go back to sort of basics and start with an empathy circle, see if other people would like to join, and then just start with an open empathy circle to talk about developing the project, as well as it's a way to kind of connect with others and sort of ground the whole Defining Empathy project in the empathy circle process, which is core to what we're doing. And I think is what is really unique about this project. It's not like, hey, we're just defining empathy out there, but we're really defining it in that practical terms of what's going on in the empathy circle. So let me just give a quick tour of the website. Hopefully you've seen this before we go into the empathy circle. So if you go to definingempathy.com, you'll see there's just the home page. There's various reasons for doing this project there. And then across the top is the way of being. It says way of being. And this is the model we're developing. And this is something I've been, pretty much working on for, I don't know, over 10 years or, I've been working on the topic of empathy for, going on 14 or 15 years. And this was a sort of the basic framework that I've been really using. It's a bit different from the typical cognitive affective model. And I've talked with, academics, and I've interviewed hundreds, over 300 people, and kind of operating from this model. And I think it really holds up well. It's based on the work of Carl Rogers, and you can just go through and, read the different facets of empathy, seeing empathy as a way of being, and that there's different facets, and these were some of the different ways of being. So hopefully you can, the different facets of it, so you can, go and check that out. Hopefully you already have. Then there's the other aspect is putting together a list of blocks. There's all these different blocks to empathy. If you're familiar with NVC, they do a lot of work on the blocks, and just putting a whole list of the blocks to empathy. And a lot of it's based on the work of Thomas Gordon, who was one of the first people to really articulate some of the major blocks. And he had background with Carl Rogers, which is sort of our starting point. Then these are models. So these are other models of people who have different models of empathy. So I'm just putting those in. Just you can go through, I've got a model, Carl Rogers, which is basically the foundation. And there's all these others here. So it's just a placeholder. And then this is the workshop. So if you go to this, there's a basic outline here already of the workshop, or the training. It's going to be 6 or 7 or more sessions. And so the basic framework is there. And then there's just a development area, just all kinds of different references, here, and meeting notes and stuff like that. So that's sort of an overview. The website is really good to, review the website, just read everything. It's going to take a while to, to kind of work your way into it, to get familiar with all the different aspects of it. Violetta, do you want to say some more before we go into an empathy circle? Because you've got good understanding of what we're doing here and why we're doing it.
It's just Edwin and I got kind of lonely, and we thought an empathy circle is the best way to keep on defining what empathy is. So it's definitely not the start of the process, but we appreciate people joining in with all the different points of view that everybody's bringing. So maybe a hope for a bigger team, a kind of creative sparks here and there. But a lot of work has already been done, mostly by Edwin, as you can imagine.
And then the basic framework is there, and we have these different topics. So we have self-empathy, which is Priyanka and Colin are working on that. And I'm working with all the different teams because there's already a lot, kind of set up there. Violetta, her specialty is imaginative empathy, and, developing the lesson for a session on imaginative empathy. And then I was hoping to recruit Lou to do blocks to empathy, because it's very much overlapping with challenges in the empathy circle. But we just wanted to put the topic in there. How might we develop this defining empathy training, and what is alive for you about this project? And we just want to go around and take maybe 4-minute turns. Does somebody want to keep time? Has anybody got a clock? You want to take time? Yeah, just, and so we can just get started. Everyone knows how to do the empathy circle, and we're recording this too. And you can also, take notes. I see somebody's already taking notes in the document, which is great. Yeah, whoever wants to start, what do you think about this project? And or what is alive for you about it? And select your listener.
So I can start. Oh,
Is it
you want to go ahead, Crystal?
If I keep the camera off because I keep coming and going?
It's fine. You can just observe too if you want.
Did you want to go, Crystal? No. Okay, could you be my reflector?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so I just had some thoughts pop up, so I thought I'd jump in with those. So the first thing was, Edwin, when you showed the page that has kind of the layout of the different sessions, that there are whatever 5 or 6 sessions, and each one focuses on a different aspect of empathy, like imaginative or whatever, self-empathy, imaginative empathy. What popped up for me was kind of as an instructional designer, because what's listed under those sessions is just, presentation slides and then, maybe one other line. So I think for each session, you should have some information presentation, which is, the slides that you're talking about probably is that, like talking about what does imaginative empathy mean? And if you could show an example of it, or you can, help people understand what it is you're talking about. And then, as a basic learning structure, you want to present information, you want to give people an opportunity to practice what you are talking about, and then you want to give them an opportunity to reflect on it. That's basic learning. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Edwin.
Yeah, Lou, what I'm hearing you say overall is you're mapping the customer journey. And if you went into detail, and I think Edwin's taking notes on that, but it's really what I'm hearing you say is mapping the human experience through the empathy circle.
Yeah, and
Start to finish.
I'm actually saying something more specific than that, which is I think that each module should have, information presented about that kind of empathy, and then an opportunity to practice in some way, and then an opportunity to reflect on what you learned about it. I'll stop there.
So you're saying taking the head knowledge to the heart in terms of application and actually applying the process that we're learning.
Yeah, and the practice could be that you do an empathy circle, and in that empathy circle you only use the kind of empathy that you're trying to practice. That might be one way to do it. Or the reflection part might be an empathy circle, and that the practice is some other kind of exercise that focuses on trying to actually do or experience the type of empathy you're talking about. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so you actually could, in application, apply a practice of empathy specifically that you want to focus on and cultivate, and do it within the empathy circle.
Yeah. And then the other thought that was popping up for me was just and I think I expressed this the last time we were talking about this course, which is I guess a concern that I have about the volume of information that you might present to people about empathy, and whether that would really inform them or increase their capacity, or whether it would just overwhelm them. And so I think you want to be careful to do the former, not the latter.
30 seconds.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say you want to be very careful about not overwhelming them with too much information, and to keep the door open to their evolution in this movement and as a human being.
Yeah, thanks. I feel heard. Thank you.
You're muted, Crystal, so select your listener.
Yeah, I want to apologize right up front, right out of the gate.
Who are you speaking to?
Yeah, before I start speaking, if I could just take a moment. Lou, I am in my head because so much of what you were saying has been on my heart. And so as I was processing it, so I'd like to ask who would like to speak. I mean, who would like to listen to me speak? Why am I nervous at the moment? Yeah, who would like to be my listener?
Jana has her hand up.
Jana.
I'll listen to you now because I have a moment at work.
Great, Jana, thank you so much. As Lou is speaking, what's coming up for me is what I had been pondering after reading Edwin's material and merging that with my own thoughts.
So what came up for you while you were listening to Lou is also reading the material and and what came up for you in your own thoughts. I'm not sure, that sounds maybe disjuncted.
And it's really the beauty of this challenge that this is really a startup in the making. And although each of us, have come to the table with a different investment and a different hypothesis from our own life experiences, and we're all building on the work of great people who have inspired all of us. We have to embrace this from the beginner's mindset.
So even though we're standing on the shoulders of really great people who've put a lot of effort into empathy, this is also a startup and we need a beginner's mind.
And in that beginner's mindset, even when people go to the website, it's, the power of a word cloud and allowing people as individuals to define for themselves what is empathy for them in their culture.
And you're mentioning the power of a word cloud and allowing people to define for themselves what is empathy for them in a cultural context, in their own culture.
Because when you do a startup, investment comes not just from people showing up, but being part of the whole journey. And as we're connecting with people who are awakening to the need for this empathy movement, they also need to be invested in the process.
So you're saying that the startup also requires participation, investment, that people need to be part of the process, that it's in this process of waking up, it's not just enough to show up, they really need to be invested in it.
And how can we honor the work of all the people before us who have laid out these beautiful roadmaps for different types of empathy that can meet, across many cultures, but then intersect at a point of acceptance and awareness.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking how we can somehow make this empathy available to all the different cultures and intersect and allow each to define themselves and still be connected.
And I think sometimes, as much as we want to control the process, like even what is the definition of empathy, that it is so unique. And as long as we hold true to the mission statement of that Edwin and Violetta initially put forth, and we hold true to those values, then I think we'll all get there together.
And you think that as long as we hold true to the mission statement that Violetta and Edwin put forth, that that together we'll get wherever we're going. So it's a connected world.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
What's the last name? Alexis.
Just a second, just somebody needs to sign a chart.
Yes.
Just take 2 seconds and it's relatively painless. Hi, Monsieur Alexis. My listener. Colin, would you like to be my listener?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, it's interesting what Crystal was saying. Let's see about it's almost as if compassion is Tibetan. It really is Tibetan. It's a key word in the culture, and altruism doesn't appear anywhere in the empathy definitions. I've only had like a cursory look at the pages and the material that you people have been working on for quite a lot. It looks like the whole thing is really all set to go, really. So maybe we just take the class, do the training. It looks really very, very thorough and very beautiful. I'm sorry, I didn't pause.
So you're just reflecting how impressed you are on all of the work that's been done till now on the website. And you made a comment on compassion being Tibetan, and that there was no mention of altruism in there that you could see on the website.
Yeah, there are a lot of synonyms. I mean, the Dalai Lama calls for a spiritual revolution, for which he defines as an ethical revolution, ethics. So I've really been working hard on promoting ethics, which I find in great shortcoming. Mm,
Okay, so you're talking about the Dalai Lama and his spiritual revolution, which you're reframing as an ethical revolution. You see real need for that.
yeah, so it's really important to have the motivation really very clear, a universal motivation to embrace every human being.
Okay, so you're talking about everyone being included to have this universal motivation and to
Yeah,
be clear about it.
and I feel heard. I'm at work. That's all I can say right now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I will choose Violetta. Is that okay, Violetta?
My pleasure.
I'm trying to not get too bogged down in all of the subtleties of language when it comes to defining empathy and distinguishing it from, for example, compassion, because it just ends up confusing me.
You're trying to steer clear from linguistic confusion about empathy, what empathy is, and its neighbor concepts, for example, compassion, because you get confused.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad to be part of this project because, well, personally, I see it as a great opportunity to shape the direction that the Empathy Circle movement takes, and so I've got this feeling of gratitude at the moment.
You're really grateful to be part of this project because it will affect the overall shape of the Empathy Circle movement.
One of the reasons self-empathy is a topic that's important to me is that I find it sometimes difficult to focus and to reflect back. And actually in my first Empathy Circle, which was not so long ago, last month, I wanted to just get up and leave. But by practicing self-empathy, I stayed.
Self-empathy is very important for you because your first Empathy Circle was just a month ago. And it was so hard to focus and follow what the other person is saying that you just wanted to get up and leave. But the self-empathy is what allowed you to stay there, to find this space within you to give to the other.
Mm-hmm. And also this motivation to grow and to get out of my comfort zone, that also convinced me to go through the pain.
So in a way, joining this project carries some pain for you, but you're motivated to grow and to kind of lean into discomfort. So that growth would be your goal.
Mm-hmm. I'd just like to finish by saying I'm happy to be partnering up with Priyanka and whoever else in the group would like to partner up. But because I know Priyanka already, and we have worked together on facilitating in the work that reconnects, something completely different.
Okay.
I think that we can. My thoughts are a little bit disjointed, but I think that we can work well together, and that we have I have the feeling that we have a shared understanding of what self-empathy means.
You excited to work with Priyanka and whoever else joins the team of the self-empathy? You and Priyanka have some prior working relationship. So you're kind of confident that you will find a common ground and you will be a good team, and that will allow whoever joins to also get this type of traction towards self-empathy.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
That was my timer. Okay, thank you. Lou, would you mind listening to me? Or is Lou gone? Okay, I guess he's not. That's a picture. DJ, could I invite you to be my listener, please? Okay.
Yes, that'd be great.
My passion for defining empathy comes from the passion for empathy itself, but also the passion to distinguish empathy from counter empathy ideas and movements that have been somewhat popular in recent years. And Edwin and I have talked about that these movements against empathy are often a result of just misunderstanding of what really empathy is.
So your passion about empathy is related also to your passion about understanding the counter empathy movements. And it seems, after working with Edwin about these counter empathy movements that have been popular in recent times, is that a lot of times it might just be misunderstandings.
Yes. We often talk about this kind of definition being more an academic endeavor, and then doing the empathy itself as doing the real work. That's not how I see of how I think of life. I believe we're human beings that are beings of meaning, and that meaning transforms everything below, including our everyday movements through life. So defining empathy, I think, is an important portion of how do we do empathy and how do we transform a culture towards a more empathetic community or society.
So your interest in empathy goes beyond the academic definition, and you are very interested in exploring this idea of how empathy can be healing and bridging and make it a better world, because empathy lives within us. It's part of being human, it's part of our humanity, and it's just a matter of learning how to be with that in community.
Excellent. With that correction, that I do believe I'm very much pro the academic definition being accurate, and then probably shared with the wider public in a language that's easy to chew and makes an impact. Because I think it is important how we make a sense, what kind of meaning we see in what we call empathy.
And so you agree with what I said, except for a slight correction. And I believe that correction is that you do agree with what's going on in the academic circles in terms of defining empathy and exploring empathy. But you would like to make it more palatable for the public, put it into ways that everybody could have access to it, because it really is about meaning making for you. And you think that once it becomes part of the meaning making for the large majority of the world, that we will move toward a more empathetic world.
Beautiful. Thank you, DJ. I feel fully heard.
Thank you. Edwin?
Mm-hmm. Listening.
Yes. All right, so I would really like to go back to what Crystal was saying about how defining empathy has to be something that's based on the individuals involved in that meaning making.
So you want to go back to what Crystal is saying about hearing from everyone about their meaning making and how the definition is sort of comes from that. So it's being inclusive of everybody's definition, like something along those lines.
Yes. And I also want to include what you were saying, Edwin, at our last Friday. No, I guess it was the Saturday meeting that we had with just 4 of us and you. And it was very profound for me how you were talking about how we're swimming in empathy, that everything we do and all the meaning making that we live as humans is empathy.
And it was, we did the circle together, and that was a sort of a profound insight that you had when I said that we're swimming in empathy, and that was just really very meaningful to you.
Yes, and it is something that I have felt my whole life, that I am swimming, sometimes drowning, in empathy. And I think that the world needs more empathy or more recognition of the empathy that we're all swimming in, or ways to articulate that experience of being in this pool, in this ocean of empathy, with respect for difference, of course, but also that commonality is so important to come up with.
So you see, it's important to explain how that swimming in empathy, sort of explaining that, but also including some differences too. Maybe differences,
Right.
how people see things, or.
Right. And so, like, what is the power of empathy? And how can it make a better world? And how does that happen in small groups to expand out to larger organizations and institutions and systemic change towards an empathetic way of being, where we don't have the climate change issues, we don't have the mass extinction issues, we don't have the violence issues, we don't have all of these things that are happening because we're empathetic in our way of being.
So it's about that empathetic way of being and how it really addresses social problems, and sort of using that way of being for addressing, and how, so it's sort of mapping out how that happens.
Yes, and I believe that we all live within a definition of empathy, even if we can't articulate it yet.
And we all have our definitions of it, even if we can't put it to words and define it.
So I feel fully heard.
Okay, speak to Lou then.
Listening.
Yeah, right now there was 6 sessions, and I had thought of, oh, maybe we need a 7th session, and session 1 is sort of sharing the empathy as a way of being model, and then just having an empathy circle to hear from everyone what their definition is.
Yeah, so the current design of the training is 6 modules, and you had been thinking about adding a 7th module where you describe the way of being model, and then have an empathy circle where people just talk about their what empathy is for them.
And it sort of it maps over to what we do in the facilitator training. We just hear from everyone what their values are, so everybody can bring, what their values are to the table, and then also in this situation they can bring their definitions to the table and bring it into an empathy circle to discuss it.
So your idea to do that, to add a session on that, is similar to one of the sessions we have in the Empathy Circle Facilitator training, where people talk about their values. In this case, they would talk about their definition of empathy. And it also sounds to me like you're saying that in response to the ideas of people saying that a community should build it together, build the meaning together, as opposed to coming with a definition.
And so there is that, then everybody can kind of bring to the table exactly like, and the other part of it would be but how does your definition relate to the empathy circle? Because the thing is, we want to keep it from being this abstract, never ending, which is a lot of fun definitions. I kind of enjoy that. But let's really how is your definition? Where do you see it playing out in the empathy circle? So we're always grounding the definition in something that's happening in the circle.
Yeah, so a really important element of that process of bringing in everyone's ideas about definitions is asking them how they see empathy. How does that relate to the empathy circle practice? Because you really want the meaning of empathy to be grounded in how do we actually do it. That's really important to you.
Yeah, and I've talked to like the critics of empathy. I mean, I had big discussions with them. There's like the author of The Dark Side of Empathy, and I'm saying, hey, empathy is all light, and he's saying it's dark. So we're having this discussion, and you kind of get up all over the place with these discussions. But I think if we can ground it and say, okay, where is it that we're having an empathy circle? Where do you see the dark side of empathy playing out in this circle, or where do I see the light playing out? And that we're always kind of bringing it back to a real lived experience that we can sort of point to.
So you've been at this a long time, and you're very aware of kind of the wide range of thinking and discussion there is about what empathy is. And so one of the reasons it's important to you to ground the discussion in the empathy circle practice, or how does this play out in the empathy circle practice, is that you think that will actually expose what things are actually empathy and what things are maybe not so much.
And the other starting point of the definition is Roger's empathic listening, which is basically in the empathy circle, you are now listening to me, and he as a therapist would be the listener, and the speaker would just be heard. And it's like that is the beginning, is you as the listener listening and empathizing with me. It's sort of the core starting point of the definition.
Yeah, so and for you and all the work that you've done, Rogers is really the foundation. You really feel strongly about how he defined it, and how it grew out of that therapeutic model of a person listening to another person. And the empathy circle is different, it's more mutual, but it's that same basic practice.
I feel fully heard. Thanks, Lou.
Okay. I'll go to Jana.
Okay.
What do I want to say? So many interesting ideas. So I made a few notes. So the first note I have is what we have words for. So I think, in the discussion that has been happening here about empathy, so I really believe that we're wired for empathy. So empathy is something human beings do very naturally. If you watch little babies and if you watch adults caring for babies, there's just like an instant connection that actually doesn't have words. There's a lot of nonsense sounds that adults make with babies, but there is connection going on. So I definitely think human beings are wired for empathy.
So you heard a lot here, and you weren't sure where to start, but you're sharing that you feel that human beings, without a doubt, are wired for empathy, and gave the example of when we connect with a little baby and no words are necessary, we just connect.
Yeah. So human beings do that without having words for it necessarily, or they couldn't articulate it or define it. It's just something that we're wired to do. I do think that, and that's true, actually, I think of all of our feelings, and I think of emotional intelligence as actually increasing awareness of that process and having words to describe it. That's what I think developing emotional intelligence is.
And to you, emotional intelligence is actually giving words to something that happens naturally and that doesn't necessarily have words, that we just do, and becoming aware of that.
Of the process, and becoming aware of the process, that a process is happening, yeah.
And becoming aware of the empathic process as it is happening.
And I think I also think that human beings get blocked in their empathic capacity, if they don't experience a lot of empathy in their life, or if they are actually told explicitly or implicitly, to stop feeling and stop paying attention, to things that are happening. And that happens to people, depending on the environment they grow up in. I'll stop there.
And you think that the extent to which we can be empathic is strongly impacted by how we grow up. And if we grow up in an environment that's really unempathic and not supportive, or if we're actually discouraged from feeling our feelings, then that can really inhibit or block us from connecting empathically.
Yes. So why am I saying all that? Well, and I do think the empathy circle process, is a structure that allows people to begin to practice that thing of actually paying attention to other people, what they're saying, and repeating it back, and maybe trying to sense the feelings that people are having, and maybe your own feelings that you're having about what's being said. It's the process of relearning that. I'll stop there.
So you think that the empathy circles really provide an opportunity for people to relearn the lost empathy through reflecting and listening and maybe picking up on the feelings that are being shared or felt.
Yeah. Yeah, and the question of what are the components of an empathic reflection, I think that's an interesting topic. I'd like to talk about that more. I do think that meaning, what Violetta was saying about that meaning is a very important component of it. I totally agree with that, not just the feelings. I think the meaning is really important.
So you're saying that what Violetta was saying about meaning is a very important part of empathic reflection, and you want to talk more and elaborate more in the future about what constitutes empathic reflecting. And it's not just feeling the feelings, but also getting the meaning right.
Yeah, thank you. I feel very heard. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you. Oh, I have to say something. DJ, would you like to listen to me?
Sure.
Empathy. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about the academic intellectual meaning part, that monkey wrench that people threw into this pure light of empathy.
You're going to talk about the academic side of it, what you call the monkey wrench that people throw into this discussion.
Yeah, I used an empathy questionnaire comparing empathy to splitting way back in 2005. And that empathy questionnaire, maybe I had 4 parts, but I used 3 parts of it. I used the perspective taking. What's it called? There's empathic distress. That's the monkey wrench. and there's one more. I forget what it is. Empathic concern.
You wrote an article about splitting, empathy and splitting in 2005, and you divided it into 3 sections. One is perspective. Another is, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's okay. 3 parts, and 2 of them are good. Perspective taking and empathic concern are the light part of empathy, and the empathic distress is this terrible part of that the academics introduced into empathy to kind of mess it up. Some insincere, perhaps, academics. I have to get up. So you want to reflect quickly, and I'll disappear?
So the empathetic concern and the empathetic perspective, or the light part, are the are the good parts, and the monkey wrench is the dark side of empathy, or the distress, empathy distress that comes from academia, and that's the monkey wrench that they throw into the discussion about empathy.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're finished, Jenna?
Yeah.
Okay. Violetta?
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay, is it Violetta or Violetta?
Violetta, if you speak Spanish, you would pronounce it exactly the same. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for being mindful.
I really like what you were saying before about the meaning making. And I think that process of meaning making can be a process that you do as a self, as an individual, or it can be a process that you do with another individual or a small group of individuals, or even a larger group of individuals under some circumstances.
The meaning making concept really impressed you? It's an important process according to you? You can do it individually, in small groups, or in bigger groups.
Right, and so the meaning making for me, in my academic training, in my academic perspective, which has to do with the teacher and the learner, or the teacher and the student, and how to make that relationship equal. So meaning making becomes a co-construction of meaning.
So in your paradigm, meaning making, as it relates to a teacher and a learner, is about removing the power imbalance between the teacher and the learner, and making that process equal, as they co-construct the meaning for their pair, for their dyad.
Exactly. And I'm pretty new to empathy circles, but I have to say that I've really enjoyed it. And there are certain empathy circles where there is almost like a magical elevation of connection. And almost everyone in the group, though I can't speak for everyone, but it seems like almost everyone in the group becomes part of that phenomenon.
And while you're pretty new to the empathy circles, you've participated in some where you felt this magical component to it. And to you, it seems like everyone seems to be experiencing and participating in this elevation that happens in the group.
Yes, and this elevation is a connection. And that connection has, you can call this connection many things. In my work, I call it, it's a Victor Turner term, who was a symbolic cognitive anthropologist and thinker. He termed it, he coined it communitas.
So Victor Turner coined this magical elevation that happens within a group that's strongly connected. He called it communitas.
Right. It doesn't have to be a group. It can just be two individuals.
Okay.
And it's very fleeting, and it's very, it's almost like food for the soul.
This connection doesn't need to be in a group. It could be between two individuals. And it's like food for the soul. It's very fleeting.
It's very fleeting, but at the same time, it's very nutritious for the soul. And so it is what we are drawn to.
We are nourished and drawn to this communitas experience.
Yes, it puts us in liminality.
It puts it in this liminal space.
Yes,
in between individuals.
Yes, and I see this happening in empathy circles. And I am curious as to why that happens, how that happens, and if it happens for other people.
and you've seen it in the empathy circles, and you're very interested in this phenomenon, and you're interested how that happens, why in other groups or via other processes,
And if it happens at all.
or if it happens.
Others. Okay. Very good. Thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
My honor. Thank you. Crystal, could I ask you to be my listener, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. What Jana or Jana, I'm not sure how she pronounced her name, she was referring to an instrument I also used in my research. And Davis, the fourth element that Davis used in that questionnaire is fantasy. And this is the imaginative part of empathy that I'm most passionate about. So I'm so bummed you left it out. I'll stop here for Crystal.
Yeah, Violetta, you're reflecting on how Gina beautifully shared your work, and the fantasy component, the fourth subset, was left out. And that's your passion, is the fantasy part of empathy building.
Mark Davis is the author, and he called it fantasy. Most people would call it imagination.
And Mark Davis is the author, and he called it fantasy, but that most people would likely call it imagination.
Correct. But I wanted to go back a little bit to your words, Crystal, and about how this particular process that we're going through right now would look like in the longer term, as Edwin and I have invited you and maybe a wider group to join and bring your investments in this startup, and how I've just been wondering what is the best way to provide that space for you to feel like you're co-creating this meaning of designing empathy. Okay, I'll stop right here.
Yeah, and you're excited about the opportunity to bring new people in, and at the same time reflective of how to do that in a way that we all feel invested and as part of the process.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm not sure I have the answer, apart from the fact that the empathy circle itself is a place that gives space, is a place that provides spaciousness for us to be with whatever we bring.
And you're not sure yet of the answer, but what you are sure of is the empathy circle is the place to be in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. I feel fully heard.
If I could take a moment, please. Lou, would you like to be my speaker, my listener?
Yes, I'd love to.
Thank you. Building on what everyone has shared and honoring the stage that you set, this customer map that is really not a customer, right? It's really the humanity in each of us longing for that deeper connection. And you perfectly illustrated that with your chronicling the journey that we all take in this empathy movement.
Yeah, so you're saying that that common humanity is really important to you, and that you love the way that I described how children are we're naturally empathetic, and the things that happen to us maybe make us more or less empathic as we grow, and that journey had that description of that had a lot of meaning for you.
It did, and it's really the human, as Steve Jobs would say, it's the human experience, right? And together, we're all here learning and relearning together, as Reid Hoffman would say. And that's why I think this is like a startup. And there is so much opportunity here when people have the capacity to put their egos aside.
Yeah, so you think that this process of creating this course and helping people understand what empathy more, that that's really important, and that it's actually what being human is understanding that. And you think that the greatest chance for doing that successfully has to do with bringing people together and then setting our egos aside to let that happen.
Yeah. And as we come together in the first circle and define what empathy means to us, that's really the gateway then for the journey to then decide where is that person and where do they want to go next, whether it's to fantasy, empathy building, self-empathy, and all of us have a different construct and a different, frame of reference in our journey. And the beauty of the individual, putting this to the individual level, starts with defining empathy.
So I think you're saying that every person is on their own journey towards understanding what empathy is, and that you think that what Edwin described as like a first step where people bring what they think empathy is, and they're talking about that in an empathy circle, that that's a crucial first step in that process of supporting people developing their own understanding.
And all of us have that different perspective, whether it's peace building or fantasy, in terms of what is our end goal, and how to use empathy to help honor our highest calling. And so I think this beautiful word cloud is honoring Violetta's introduction to allowing people to be a part of the process, would be a great exploration on LinkedIn. For all of us to share and see what empathy means to the masses and to those people who actually respond.
So I think you're saying that each of us kind of has our own life journey, and we have our own purpose to which we might put empathy and understanding, and that you think the idea of a word cloud is a good way to stimulate or embody the different kinds of meanings or ways that people might apply empathy.
Yeah, and I think that will lead them to the circle, and also lead them on their path of self-discovery, and to what DJ beautifully shared, is this Victor Turner term where we all feel this connection. And that comes when people are ready. And sometimes people's egos aren't ready. And when they are, I believe that's when they feel the magic.
Yeah, so you think that word cloud like that would be a good introduction and a good way to lead people into an empathy circle process where they begin to discover what empathy is for them and what they might want to do with it. And you think that that's let's see, I think I lost the last piece. Something about that's part of what it means to fulfill kind of each of our destinies as human beings. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the magic happens, is when we
magic,
can
right.
come together and relearn, right?
Right.
And we don't know what we don't know until we know. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go to Colin.
Yes, it's been a while. I'm still here.
Yeah. Let's see, what do I want to say? Well, I strongly agree with the idea that, coming into the Empathy Circle facilitator training or this training or Empathy Circles, just Empathy Circle participation, everyone is in a different place because we've all had different life experiences. And so the Empathy Circle facilitator training and a good Empathy Circle facilitator and a good teacher tries to take into account the different places where people are when they come in.
Okay, you're talking about how we're all different, that we're all starting from different starting points, that we all have different experiences, and that it's important in the empathy circle facilitation to take that into account.
Yeah, and I think, and I, in the empathy circle facilitator training, I try to emphasize strongly that, effective facilitation welcomes people wherever they are and at whatever kind of level of empathic reflection they can do, because people have different capacities for that when they start, and that it's really important to be accepting of where people are.
So you're really emphasizing how important it is to meet people where they are, to show them that, to acknowledge that, to accept them for where they are and the journey that they're on, and to recognize that we're all on different journeys.
And one of the dangers of defining empathy a lot too early on is that you risk having people telling other people in the circle, "Hey, that's not empathic. That was not a good reflection. That you're not doing empathy." And I saw that happen a lot in the teaching of nonviolent communication that I got exposed to, and it doesn't help people learn.
So you're talking about the downside of defining anything, so in this case empathy, too tightly, as it were, because then you may have people calling each other out in the empathy circle on what is and what isn't empathy, and that could be counterproductive.
Yeah. And so I think it's very effective, and I like very much that just participating in the empathy circle helps people learn that without a lot of, without becoming self-conscious about it.
So just by participating in the empathy circle, they're going to learn and define empathy for themselves, maybe. I'm not sure what you said at the end, but
yeah, without becoming self-conscious about it. Yeah.
right, that. Mm-hmm.
So I do think, I myself am operating from a definition of what I think empathy is. And I pretty much believe it's the, nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg says an empathic guess is guessing at the person's feelings and what he calls their needs, which has to do with their values, their desires, or like why it's important to them. Those are kind of the three measuring sticks that I use. And by needs, he means universal human needs. I'll stop there.
Well, you're talking about, you're pretty clear on what empathy means for you, and you're referencing NVC and Marshall. Marshall, we all know who Marshall's last name is, but I've just forgotten it. Rosenberg. Yeah, breaking it down into needs and values, needs and feelings, and then taking this this guess, this empathic guess. Are you feeling ... because you need ...
Yeah. So I know my time's up. I'm trying to think if there's one more thing I want to say. I guess I'll stop there. Well, I guess I want to say that just given your reflection, that particular formulation, are you feeling because you're needing, that formulation is not required. I just want to point that out. Yeah.
Okay, so just correcting me on that last formulation from NVC, that it's not required as part of defining empathy.
Right. Or as part of doing empathy, right? That particular formulation is not required, yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Colin. I appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. I will pick Edwin, if that's okay.
Listening.
So now I'm getting a little bit confused because I'm doing the compassionate communication course with Tom Bond at the moment, and this week we've been talking about that exact formulation that I just mentioned.
You're doing the compassion training with Tom Bond, and you're just talking about the feelings needs formulation that Lou was talking about. So somehow there's some confusion created for you about that.
It's just showing me that empathy means, how we define empathy and how we practice empathy means different things to different people.
And it's just modeling for you, demonstrating how people have different definitions and understandings of what empathy means.
Right, and how to practice it. I like there being a certain amount of flexibility in the definition so that people can come to their own conclusions, perhaps in the circle themselves. I mean, that there would be certain parameters, maybe building blocks given to them, and then they can take a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of the other and mix it all up to make it into the definition that suits them.
So you would like something where there's a little variety of choices and people can kind of build their own definition.
Right. So we would be giving them those the building blocks, as it were, that we would perhaps. I find the word cloud idea a good idea of crystals. We could be taking the building blocks from there, or we could be taking them from Carl Rogers' work, or some academic study.
And so you're liking the word cloud idea of a lot of different definitions, and maybe there'd be those definitions, those from Rogers, etc. And you could sort of choose and make your own.
I think if it's personal to me, then it's going to have more significance, and I'm more likely to make it my own and really want to live it.
Yeah, and if it's sort of if it's like personal, and then you're going to really embody it and live it, instead of if it's sort of imposed on you.
And you've just said a word that I wanted to speak about, that I wanted to mention briefly, and that is embodied. There's also the felt experience of empathy, and how that should also, I believe, be included in this definition.
And I'd mentioned embodied, and there's the felt experience of empathy, and you think that should be mentioned too in the definition, how it feels.
And perhaps it could also be part of the reflection process in the empathy circle, that people also consider how they're feeling in their body as they listen to the speaker.
And even in the empathy circle, something could be done there where you sort of identify what your felt experience is.
Right, because empathy is an emotion, and all emotions are stored in our bodies, as feelings, and empathy has not just the cognitive dimension; it has the felt dimension also.
And you want to bring in the felt experience, the felt dimension, just not the cognitive, and sort of identify those feelings.
Mm-hmm. And then just one last point on the dark side of empathy. And I think in the definition it would be important to talk about what empathy is not, to make that clear distinction.
And in terms of the definition, lay out what is not empathy, so related to the dark side. So you got the definition, what it is and what it isn't. It would kind of help with clarity, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. I'll speak to Violetta.
Of course.
So yeah, to begin with, I agree with the premise. We're swimming in empathy, and that there's blocks to it. So or things that are not empathy, and that's in the definition. On the website, And that's actually one of the sessions is the blocks to empathy. So we can go into exploring those blocks.
So you're referring back to the idea that we're swimming in empathy, and we're doing empathy at all times. And then there are blocks to empathy, and it is part of this of the curriculum so far.
And the other is, again, to try to, as we're discussing here, I would like to remind everyone, try to define what you're saying within the context of the empathy circle that we're doing, right? It's like, so in terms of the blocks, it's like I'm speaking, you're empathizing with me. And if you don't hear me, you know, if you're judging me instead of reflecting and you're just saying, oh, you're wrong about that, then that would be sort of a block to you really listening to me. So that is a demonstration of a block within the context of the empathy circle.
So you're reminding everybody that whatever we talk about in terms of defining empathy, we can try to ground it in the process of the empathy circle itself. So when we talk about a block to empathy, we could use, for example, oh no, you're wrong, and kind of demonstrate what we mean by this particular block to empathy.
And somebody mentioned empathic distress as a negative dark side, you know, that the academics have added. Well, the model of that is now I'm speaking and you get distressed by what I'm saying. You know, if I say something really, and you're distressed, and then instead of you reflecting what I'm saying, your distress takes over and said, I can't listen to you anymore. I can't do this. You know, you're wrong, or you kind of lash back because you're just overwhelmed. So that's within the empathy circle, how the distress plays out. And, you know, they try to call it empathic distress. It's not it's just distress. There's nothing empathic about it. It's actually a block to empathy. And that's where the academics, I think, get it all kind of messed up.
And when we talked about empathic distress earlier, you're saying, for example, we could play it out in the empathy circle by saying, you know, I'm listening to you, but I just can't take it. I'm overwhelmed too much. I'm going to move on. And that's why the academics mess it up.
Yeah, and we can actually role play the distress, right? Just showing, well, that's not empathy because you're no longer listening to me. You're overwhelmed with distress. And it might be in reaction to what I'm saying. But in that sense, that doesn't make sense that it's an empathic distress, because every reaction is almost like a response to some kind of to something else. We can't have every response be empathic distress, empathic joy, empathic anger, empathic. It's just conceptually is just kind of illogical, it seems to me.
But what I omitted from it is that aspect that the empathic distress is not empathy at all. Mm-hmm. And that's what the circle will show quite clearly, that we can't just call any reaction to what I hear empathic, because I'll have reactions at all times, and some of them will be blocks and some will be empathy.
Yeah, so within the typical academic definition of empathy as cognitive and affective empathy, they're calling empathic this distress, they're calling it empathy, which is like totally confusing. I mean, it doesn't make sense. The problem I see is that a lot of the people coming up with this are cognitive psychologists that don't have the clinical work, because there's this difference between the cognitive people and the people that are actually doing, you know, clinical work. So anyway, that's just the peeve I've got about what they're doing. They're making a mess of things.
Yeah, there's a mess because the cognitive psychologists often don't have the actual lived experience of how to do empathy, because again, the empathic distress is everything but empathy, anything else.
Yep. Feel hurt.
Okay. DJ, could I ask you to listen to me again?
Listening.
Okay. First, to note that it's an interesting way we're talking to one another. The empathic circle could make things more complicated, but to defend the academic community against Edwin's vicious attacks, I'm going to go a little bit more technical, but I'm hoping it will make sense. I'll try to put the teacher's hat on, and obviously the ones that have done academics will get it pretty quickly. Actually, Davis did not call it empathic distress. He called it personal distress. He consciously removed empathic from it and replaced it with personal. And he proved that there's a negative correlation between empathic concern and personal distress. I'll stop here.
Okay, so you're going to speak to what you have perceived as Edwin's attacks on the academic definitions, and you want to make a correction that Davis did not call it empathetic distress or personal distress. It was actually something else that you're going to have to help me with.
Basically, he made the point that the moment we are distressed by the content of what another person shares with us, we stop being able to empathize. Okay. Oh, there. Thank you.
Yes. So what Davis was saying is that the distress happens when you're like focused more on yourself and you're not really listening empathetically.
Exactly. That's the point, when it's self-oriented rather than other-oriented. Again, as somebody who loves reading academic papers and books, I would say that I would gladly stay in that place of reviewing all academic literature. Edwin himself reads quite a bit, and I don't see it divorced from the practice of empathy. Rather, I see it as an opportunity to enrich my work with my clients. It will help me follow these finer nuances of what is empathy and at what point I'm starting to fail being empathetic.
So you find your academic knowledge and your reading of academic knowledge very important to your work when you're working with your clients, that it really helps with the nuances of the meaning making for you as a clinician.
And as we're working on this defining empathy module, I think the challenge is, how do we develop a process that's excellent in terms of rooting the whatever definitions we bring to the conversation in the empathy circle, because that is the embodied expression of empathy, but still making sure that we are epistemologically, philosophically also rooted in a thinking process that could be justified.
So it's a process for you. And for you, it's a process that needs to be justified through the epistemology and the ontology of empathy in the academic journals. And so you're kind of interested in, how does that process happen in an empathy circle, where we do, justice to everyone that comes to the circle and their meaning making, when everybody is different and some people are more academic than others.
Wonderful. Thank you, DJ. Feel fully heard.
Thank you. It was an honor. Well, I love that word process. Let's see. Crystal? Will you be my listener?
Yes, thank you.
So I do love that word process so much, and I love meaning making so much. And I really am seeing it play out in the empathy circle right now.
You value the process. You love that word, and you see how it's playing out right now in this empathy circle.
Right, with the meaning making of everybody who's here.
Yeah, with the meaning making.
And so I'm thinking that if we were to try to build a model of how to define empathy within the empathy circle structure and function, that we might want to think of process and meaning making as key.
And you're thinking that as we build this process and structure of the definition of meaning making of empathy, and in meaning making of empathy, that focus and process, that process is really important in the process. Sorry. I got stuck in my head. I'm sorry.
So it's the empathy circle. The empathy circle is the structure. So within the empathy circle, so let's say you're starting an empathy circle, and it might be an empathy circle that's going to continue with those individuals in that empathy circle for maybe a period of time, whether it be months or weeks or days or hours or whatever. And so the first thing that you would want to do is sort of establish this co-construction of the definition.
Yeah, so in this group setting of the empathy circle for the longevity of the process, it's constructing the definition of empathy together collectively.
For the people that are present.
Yes, for those that are present, correct. Yeah.
And that's exactly how I teach.
Yes, and that is how you teach.
This is how I teach. I do not lecture. I do not quote all the people that I've read, because probably other people haven't read them.
And this is how you teach. You don't necessarily quote others that you've read. This is the process and how you teach.
Exactly. So let's say, for example, we have an empathy circle meeting for the first time with a small group that's going to break into even smaller groups. So it's the larger group. And we just put the word empathy up, just in people's minds. And then if I had a whiteboard, which we don't need a whiteboard anymore, we can do this verbally, but you have everybody's definition and relationship to the meaning making and the definition of empathy within that circle.
Yes, so you're saying that although it's not a whiteboard, it's something where we have that definition that we've built together collectively for everyone to, use as a baseline.
Exactly, and that becomes sort of that word cluster, or that sort of symbolic process that we can always relate to. Oh, well, this is where empathy is being this, and this is where empathy is being this. What do you think of that? Are we being empathetic according to our own co-constructed definition?
Yeah, and it creates a community where we come together and encourage and also accept when we're being empathetic and when we're not, and honor our original mission of what empathy was for our group.
Well, it's fluid.
Okay.
It's a process. There's no commitment. Okay, to me, right now, empathy means A. Tomorrow, it could mean B. Next week, it could mean A, B, C, and D. And I'm allowed to do that. We have to have that freedom of expression, where empathy is that bell curve. And anything in that bell curve works at any moment that you choose, it works. I define my own empathy.
And you're speaking beautifully about the importance of autonomy and valuing our own definition of empathy, and that it's a living construction.
It's fluid.
It's fluid, yes.
I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Edwin, would you be my listener? Or I think Colin, is anyone keeping up with like how many people have had a turn? I just want to be conscious of everyone having the opportunity. Colin, would you like to be my listener?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, I just recall that you said it had been a while. So yeah. Wow, this has been so enlightening. And I'm just reflecting on the beauty of even our Constitution, that it's a living document as we are living beings.
So this is what you're hearing is really speaking to you, and referring to the American Constitution, and that that's it. It's a living document because we are living human beings.
And how we can get stifled in definitions. And even if you look at the Supreme Court and how they're arguing between, the construct of how they view words and how it leads to more discourse and polarization.
Okay, so defining things too tightly can stifle things, and this is happening in the US Supreme Court, where the polarization in the country is happening.
Yeah, and we've moved to a place where people trust, corporations over our government. And it's the beauty of honoring, as DJ was saying, that autonomy, and that we're all students and teachers of life. We were all put here to learn something and teach something, whether we're an academic or a garbage driver driving the garbage truck, my point's made. The beauty of beginners' mindsets can be embraced by academics.
Okay, so we've all got something to teach others and to learn ourselves, and that it's useful to have this beginner's mindset. And also you mentioned how autonomy is important to you. And
how important it is to have diversity of thought, like even in this room right now where we are, and also when we're building the empathy circle itself.
So for you, diversity is really important, especially when it comes to diversity of thinking and in the empathy circle itself.
Yeah, I think that groupthink can so often keep people who have great intentions, whether they be building a social media empire to serve, the purpose of connecting people, like I think was Mark Zuckerberg's, hopefully his ultimate intention. But we all get triggered, right? He was triggered in that moment when he created Facebook. And that's the beauty of these empathy circles, from my perspective, is that our triggers can lead to innovation.
Okay, so you started off talking about groupthink and warning against that, and then talked about how this idea of triggering ideas as we're doing right now can lead to innovation.
And even the dark side, right? Like that's the beautiful balance of life. Darkness and light can work together for the greater good.
So you seem to be embracing the dark, and you're saying that without darkness, there can't be any light.
Exactly. And how we can build on that when people show up with their egos, and what we can learn in the process so that we can all come together and see the humanity and the beauty in each of us.
So you're talking about coming together and seeing our common humanity and checking our egos at the door.
Thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay, so I will choose Jana. Is that okay? Are you able to listen?
Yeah, it's Jana. It's okay though.
Jana, sorry. Thank you for correcting me. I like the idea that empathy is something that a person can learn, and that the empathy circles are, an important tool in order to make that happen.
So you like that we can actually learn empathy. We like that idea, and that the empathy circles are a vehicle for that.
I mean, it just gives me hope. It's not like you weren't born empathic, so you don't have any chance to become an empathic person. I like the idea of hope,
So you like the idea. You like the idea of hope and possibility, that it's not that you're like defective, you didn't learn empathy, so you're stuck, but there's actually a possibility for change and growth.
Mm. Yes. Maybe this is one of those moments where I need to practice self-empathy and say that I'm tired at the moment and that my focus isn't as good as it was earlier on.
And you're sharing that maybe your focus isn't as good as it was before, that you're a little bit tired, and this is a moment of self-empathy.
Right. Because this is the part that I'm interested in looking at with Priyanka, how self-empathy can be embedded in the circle, and just that people are aware of, for example, to practice self-empathy if they're feeling distress.
So this is exactly, you're modeling what you're working on with Priyanka, that, or sharing what you learned with Priyanka, that self-empathy can be part of the reflective process, a part of the circle when one experiences distress.
All right, because there was a conversation earlier on about empathic distress, but actually empathy can relieve that stress when it's directed towards ourselves, if that's what we need at that moment.
Yeah, you're kind of, I'm going to add a little bit, I hope that's okay, that you're kind of confirming what Violetta said, it's not empathic distress, it's personal distress, and the empathy can relieve it.
Right. Picking up on what on Edwin's point earlier. And also that we need to check on our empathy levels and check our empathy tank and see if it's depleted, because it may be that in the circle we're not ready to really reflect as well as we can, and to acknowledge that to ourselves and to the group.
And you're also connecting with something that Edwin said earlier, and that we need to check our empathy levels or our empathy tank and see if we're, if we're up to being available for other people or not.
Right, and to communicate that also, I think is really important.
And also to share that, to communicate that when one is having difficulty.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Thank you.
Just a second, Edwin, did you mean to use the last 15 minutes of our meeting to come back to a big group, or are we going to?
Yeah, we probably should. That's probably a good
Okay.
point. I wasn't sure. I thought maybe one more, but we could.
Okay.
It's about 1:45.
Sorry, Jana.
It's, you want me to say more or stop?
Maybe this is a good time to debrief. Use the last 15 minutes. It's we're at 16 minutes, so otherwise we'll kind of go over. Okay, then I guess we could just do a debrief. We have been taking notes. I think Crystal, you've been note taking. Is that right? Or somebody's been doing a really great job of taking notes. Appreciate that.
That's a request.
Yeah.
You just let me save the full transcript in the chat before we vanish.
Of this,
Yeah.
I have a program called Otter AI. I don't know how you can save that, but this Otter AI, I can put the whole video in there and it creates a transcript. It'll create a transcript, and that transcript is actually, you can go in and listen, and we can actually give permissions to people to go through and even clean it up too. So I think that would be, but
it's very easy to save, because as soon as you request to see the full transcript, it says save transcript at the bottom.
Oh, how do you do that? I'm not familiar with that in
Just use
Zoom.
live transcript, and then you go to show full transcript, I guess it says. And then
Oh,
at the bottom,
beautiful.
there's a save transcript. So either way,
Oh, okay.
transcript.
Yeah, I hit the saved. I saved it. Let me just show you this. This will. So there's this program. I'll just show you this because this is part of the documentation of what we're doing. This is the program Otter AI, which I've run all of my videos. I have, I don't know, several, maybe like 1,000 videos or something on empathy. So you add it to this program Otter AI, and you can see it does transcripts, and you can actually go through and listen to them, and you can also go in and share it. So these programs, they don't do they do about 95% accuracy, but you can share it, and then others can go through and actually edit the transcripts too, to kind of make them more accurate. And so anyway, that was just an interview I just did with Arthur Clarke, and I just run it through there. So in terms of, I did save this transcript, but in terms of transcripts, this is a really efficient way of dealing with transcripts. Okay, I think seeing posts here. So I'm not sure. Let's see. What should we do? Be led up with this last 15 minutes. How do you think we should use it effectively, or any thoughts on this? Violetta, your
My thoughts were whether we would schedule a next step, maybe another meeting.
okay.
And there were a lot of wonderful ideas that were kind of sprinkled. I really loved the LinkedIn idea that maybe our co-creation process could become part of our virtual life for a bit as well, where we could share that with our own networks and between one another, and kind of keep building whenever we have time. And then probably have more meetings and see if anybody else wants to join any of the topics. Probably how do people see themselves involved in the future process. So we know Colin will work with Priyanka.
Yeah, so
I'm
I'll
not sure.
I'm happy to come and participate more, and this conversation was really interesting. I think it's an interesting problem of how does a conversation like this produce a result of some kind, because the empathy circle process is not really designed to produce a result other than understanding and connection, and maybe self-connection, more self-understanding. And so, right, I guess if you have some people in the empathy circle who are taking notes and who are trying to produce something, and so you're gathering bits from it, then that's input. But right, there's no step, like maybe we do empathy for a while, and then there's a step where we're moving towards some, I don't know, consensus or something, and that we didn't do that today. So I just think that's an interesting process question about how to get the results you want out of having the empathy circle. If I don't know if this produced the results that you want, and I would say as a participant, I'm enriched and nourished by the conversation and the connection, and I probably wouldn't participate endlessly without seeing that I'm actually contributing to something. It's like, it's nice to have the conversation, but what are we doing? Are we actually accomplishing something? So yeah, so those are my thoughts.
Edwin has plans for you. At least.
I know.
Well, maybe I can give the framework.
I
So
know.
what we have is there's a basic course already laid out, session 1, which is introducing the way of being model, which was with an open empathy circle for everyone to share their definition. Session 2 would be empathy, other-oriented empathy, basically Carl Rogers, empathic listening, and there's tons of that. his definition, which is, I just think is just the bedrock of empathy. You know, that's what all the work that we're doing here is really in the empathy circle is based on. The next session 3 is self-empathy, and that's what Priyanka and Colin are working on. Session 4 is imaginative empathy, and imaginative empathy is sort of a newer, it's used a lot in the definitions, imaginative empathy, but it's not so, it hasn't been explicitly laid out as a term. And that's, you know, Violetta's been working on that for quite some time. She's really interested. And it's really about a container for all the role playing, role taking, perspective taking, fantasy, all those sort of terms where you're imagining yourself in a role. And that's sort of that imaginative empathy contains that. And then the next part is relational empathy. And there's work on, instead of just seeing empathy within the context of as an individual, you as an individual empathize with someone, seeing that there's a relationship and looking at the individual, but also the nature of the relationship. And there's sort of work on, has been done on that, sort of academic work. And so one session on that, and that sort of encompasses the empathy as a way of being, so the basic, you know, the facets. We're using a diamond metaphor that the way of being is like a diamond, has multiple facets. And these are just some of, you know, many different facets. So you can always add more facets, you know, go into depth. And then the next part after that, session 6, I guess that would be, is the blocks to empathy. And that's like, you know, all the things that sort of block, you know, there's that whole list of blocks. So that's they're all kind of laid out. There's tons of work. NBC's done tons of work on blocks to empathy. And that's kind of like an easy thing to, you know, create some a session on that. And then the final one is to compare the model of an empathic way of being to other models out there, because the affective cognitive model is another, you know, popular model that's kind of gotten popularized, and to create a session to compare the two. So that's the basic framework. And the approach we're taking is you can take on one of those aspects and start, you know, working on the sort of specializing in it and creating a you know, working on the lesson. We need a 2.5-hour lesson. The lesson is, you know, a slideshow at the beginning, you know, showing a bit about that topic. You know, if it's self-empathy, you're kind of explaining, kind of giving some awareness of what self-empathy is. And then an 1.5 hours of exercises. You know, we go into small groups, or you have small groups where you're actually doing some kind of exercises to experience it, and then sort of a debrief similar to the facilitator training. So using a similar process for imaginative empathy, you know, the blocks to empathy, relational empathy. And a lot of this has kind of been laid out. So you can sort of say, hey, I'm interested in, you know, sort of working on one of those. And so just start, you know, helping to create the lesson on it. Yeah, Jana?
Are you done?
Yep.
I would like to offer, and you can, I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. It could be in another empathy circle. So sorry, those are my timers. I gotta get up. That there's the part about intention or motivation, setting a motivation or setting an intention. These words are sometimes used anonymously, but they can also have specific meanings. So that could connect to, like, the altruistic motivation could connect with other oriented, Carl Rogers, or could connect perhaps, but I'm not sure, the way Violetta is defining fantasy or imagination, or it could be its own thing. So that is what I'm interested in. So if there's a place for that, I'd be interested to contribute that.
And okay, so the idea is that we meet again ongoing in this time slot, you know, every Friday. And so we're just slowly talking about these topics and sort of coming to sort of mutual understanding through the use of the empathy circle. So I'm hearing you're saying the intention setting is an important part to you, and you're wanting to see how that would relate to the definition of empathy. And you just come to the next session, we talk about it, and to really understand what you mean by it, and how does intention relate to empathy, and how does it relate to the empathy circle? I mean, that's sort of a process going forward.
Thank you. I feel
Does
good.
that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
I have another comment I wanted to make.
Okay.
And this is about what was said about co-creation. And so the idea that, well, whatever group of people come together, they are saying what empathy means to them, and they're defining it, and all the different perspectives are important, and that the process of co-creation is very important. And I, as an educator, so I agree with that. So I think that is crucial when you're talking about a process that happens within a community. Like if I was doing this in my town where I live, and I wanted to bring people together and talk about creating a more empathic town, and have everyone come and bring their definitions of empathy and saying, we're going to co-create this together because we're building a community, and everyone's perspective needs to be heard, and people need to feel like they are building it, not like I'm coming as the expert and I'm saying this is what empathy is, and everyone needs to do what I'm saying because I'm an expert. So I totally agree with that, but I think that's important when you are building a community. If you're not in the process of building a community, if you're just like learning something about empathy and learning to become more empathic, I'm not saying there's no place for people bringing their existing experience in. Of course, that's important in education. You want people to bring their experience in and add it to or compare it to what knowledge has been created around that thing. But the idea that you would do a class about empathy, trying to teach people about empathy, and that you would not bring existing knowledge in about it, and have that be part of what is people work with when they're bringing their own stuff about empathy. I just think it's important to recognize that distinction, or to recognize that difference. Yeah.
Was that your hand up, DJ, or? Okay.
Yeah, so could I respond? I mean, actually, that's a misinterpretation of what I was saying. Everybody has knowledge inside their brain, not just academics. I'm an academic. I have nothing but academic knowledge swimming around my brain. And I'm not going to bore you with it all. So that was my point. Whoever, we have to be equal. We all have to be equal in an empathy circle. And this whole idea that I have knowledge that you need to, it's the banking model of education, where I have knowledge and I'm going to deposit it into your brain. That is obsolete, right? I think you might agree with that. But everything else you said, I agree with, but everything is a community. We're a community right now, today. And our synergy of what we said today and what we all digested and what we're all kind of integrating into our experience and knowledge base is creating that community. And if we were to come together with the same people in a different day and time, we would build on what we've already experienced here today. Correct? That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could just quickly add.
Sorry, can I just say I have to leave, if that's okay. It's
Great.
top of the hour, so thank you everyone for your time.
Bye, Colin. Nice meeting you.
We'll catch up. Yeah, thanks, Lou. Thanks, everyone.
Over a little bit here, if you're okay with that. Go ahead, Crystal.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to what is really, when Mike beautifully was sharing what to expect. He provided this Word document in another session that we had of what you can expect in an empathy circle. And what I noticed is that he had words that to me reflect values. And the beauty of what Lou was sharing is that people want to feel like they're accomplishing something, right? When they show up, I mean, we all want to build empathy. I do, but I also want to solve world problems. And when I look at the vision statement, we envision a global culture of empathy and compassion in a world where people experience the joy of being connected to each other and interconnected with all life. DJ, 100%. That's a community. It's a world community, and it's an opportunity to build that community together. And the beauty of this empathic movement is, what values do we want to have as part of that empathy building movement? And for me, I see the opportunity to come and ask big questions like, Edwin, you've beautifully done, whether it's about what's going on in our country, but then how do we get to the solution and how can we innovate? And I see the potential of this platform becoming something that could be, a metaverse, it could be, but to solve problems together and to not just grow our empathy, which I know was your vision. And so I would say that, could we come together and look at the vision statement again, and in terms of where do we want to go with this movement ultimately? And I'd love to help bridge that, because I think we're learning and unlearning together from all the works of great people like yourself who have built this movement. And I'd love to be a part of that process.
Okay, well, let me just, don't want to
So
keep us over.
I need
Okay,
to go too now. Sorry.
all right.
Very
There'll
nice
be a
being with
recording
all
of
of you.
this, some
Look forward
notes.
to
Yeah,
more.
okay, thanks, Lou.
Bye.
So we'll continue next week. And the empathy circle is that co-creation. There's no experts in the circle. That's I think the beauty of what we're doing is the empathy circle. I've spent 11 years just working on the empathy circle, the process, exactly for that sense that there's no experts. It's like we're all bringing our self to it, and you never know where it's going to go. It goes here, it goes there, it goes there. But what we're doing with this training is we are creating a curriculum to go through the maps that are already out there. There's already maps for definitions out there, and we do want to create a map that is kind of more accurate to the landscape. And there's other maps out there that are very confusing maps. And I think that's something that we can contribute. So there is already, for the training, for this 7-week training, there's already a basic curriculum sort of worked out. And it's like this empathy circle, these meetings are sort of an onboarding, hearing where you are, kind of bringing all those insights. And that I feel that enriches the whole training, to hear, oh, this is, all these great insights that everybody is bringing in. That's going to enrich the development of the training. So it is to be continued. Next week, same time, we're going to just do a quick intro, and then we'll go into the empathy circle. We've taken notes, bring all those insights again, and we'll just keep discussing the topic. And out of that, I'm working sort of full time on this. So, and then Violetta's spending a lot of time too. So we're trying to see if how we can onboard people, into this process. And I hope that this empathy circle that's happening on this time will roll into an actual training. It will turn into a training after we've gone through, I don't know, a month or 2 or 3 of these empathy circles, and bring other friends too, to kind of bring them too. So maybe we'll just do a quick, 30-second, 1-minute wrap up. Violetta, just how are you before we close?
I'm excited.
DJ?
Yeah, very interesting, very brilliant. I have nothing but respect for you, Edwin and Violetta. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Crystal?
Excitement. I share Violetta's enthusiasm
Jenna?
and
Oh,
DJ's
sorry,
respect.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Gratitude, grateful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I have to go.
Okay, bye. And I'm super jazzed because this is a big project for me now, really focusing on. So I really grateful for everyone's participation and sharing your insights. And to be continued. See you Saturday and for the training and next week, hopefully. If you can't make it, let me know for next Friday. Bye.
Bye.
And I'll post a video to give you a link.